a great place to come and maybe do walking meditation, or just enjoy the view, enjoy the forest. And yeah, let's go for a little walk here. So up ahead is the main building, where the meditation hall is and where all the rooms are, where the kitchen, everything that goes on here. Now we're here on the west side. We're heading down into the grounds. Back behind me is Victor's bench and one of our many forest Buddhas. And I find this a really wonderful place to come and sit, relax, and just enjoy being on the land. So we're going to go this way, and we've been some new steps that Stas has put in. So we've been continuing on with maintaining the grounds. So I think you can probably tell, but it's a bit of a kind of cold, misty, wet morning here, which is nice, in the summer. You may recognize this from last week, but here's the generator shed where Doug gave a little tour of our generator that's in the process of being upgraded. And now we're going to head over into the garden. A big pile of new compost here to help everything grow. So we've been growing a good amount of food here just for us. We have some tomatoes. Over here, a lot of different kinds of greens. And then we put in a lot of new fruit trees this morning. So down here is like I think this is a pineapple guava.
Yes.
Yes, great. Our greens, some chard and kale and mustard greens. Over on this side is some of our tomatoes. They're not quite ripe, but we're looking forward to a lot of tomatoes. Actually, this is a new planter box, so we're gonna have even more next year. Tree. Actually, here's something we discovered this morning on the persimmon tree. This large branch, I guess, fell in the night, which is a bit sad,
Yeah, really sad.
Yeah.
That was a big branch that fell.
Yeah. new, this one of the old apple trees, and then some new ones that we put in down here. And
This one looks like it's struggling a little bit.
yeah. New fig tree. So, all kinds of new things. New fruit.
A lot of plums.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not quite ripe, but getting there.
Oh,
A little guest
there's
appearance.
Stas. Working on the garden.
So I just love being here, coming down here to sit or do some walking meditation. We could take a little view out here. So this is just a view out of our neighbor, Sunny Acre Drive, and some of the neighboring vineyards.
And they're doing some work there. I mean, I think they're getting ready for the grapes to start growing. It's soon.
Well, I think it's time to head over to the meditation portion, and you have a wonderful mini retreat this morning. I certainly enjoyed just walking around the garden, showing you around a little bit. And after the sitting and walking, there's going to be a little community time, time to get together and meet and talk a little bit with the other people in the mini retreat. And that's from 12 to it's about 20 minutes, so maybe 12:25. And for that, you can find a Zoom link on the YouTube page, and the password is community. And with that, we'll turn it over to Andrea Fella, who's going to be teaching the mini retreat. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's lovely to see you all. Actually, not seeing you all, but knowing that you're there. I'm curious if some of you may have access to the chat channel. You can create a chat channel. I had to do this yesterday to have access to the chat. But if you do, I'd like to see you all, introduce yourselves so I can kind of know who's here. Type in your name and where you're from. That would be really lovely to get a sense of who's here, since I can't see you all. And we'll wait another minute or so. Well, actually it's 10 now, but I'll wait another minute or so just to see if a few more people arrive before starting the guided meditation. Lovely to see the variety of places people are coming in. That's one of the lovely things about our new reality that we're finding. Our Sangha has grown so large It always was this large. We just didn't get to see each other. So we'll go ahead and start. This morning, I'd like to offer maybe a different kind of practice than some of you have experienced before. There's many ways. What the focus of mindfulness practice is to establish this quality of mindfulness, of mindful awareness. And there are many ways to do that. We can focus on a particular object, direct the attention to the breath, for example, or we can settle back and receive experience, see what comes to us. This way of practicing creates creates a settledness or a stability of mind by being aware of experience moment after moment. And so that's the kind of practice I'd like to offer today, both in the sitting and the walking practice. It's helpful in any form of meditation practice to begin with relaxation. And so we'll start with a few moments of just settling in and relaxing the body. Allowing your eyes to close. And checking in to your experience, seeing if you might notice there are areas of tension in the body, and seeing if there can be a softening or a releasing of that tension. A little bit of relaxing the body. In particular, you might explore relaxing the head and face. Relaxing the face is a very powerful way to support actually relaxing the mind. And relaxing the neck and shoulders, arms and hands. Relaxing the chest and upper back. All those muscles around the rib cage. Relaxing the stomach, muscles across the stomach and the abdomen, the middle and lower back, the hips, pelvis. The legs, the feet. And then sometimes it's also possible there can be a way that we can orient or attune internally inside the body. And see if there can be a softening inside the body. So you might just check in and see maybe the inside of the throat can relax. Maybe the heart can relax. Maybe the stomach and the intestines can relax. This relaxing the physical body helps the mind to relax. We're relaxing the mind, letting go of mental tension, which can be expressed as being pulled into worries, concerns, thoughts about the past or the future. And so you might just see if you can soften or relax mental tension. As we relax the body and the mind, this creates conditions. This is supportive conditions for awareness to be available, kind of more naturally, easily available. And so just recognizing, are you aware? You may not quite know how you know that, but just if you can hear me, you know that you're here, that's enough. Just, yes, I'm aware. But this is awareness. This is what it's like to be aware. And then exploring the possibility of just orienting, being available to receive whatever awareness is taking in. It's what's most obvious in your experience. That may be body sensation, pressure, contact of your hips or body against whatever you're sitting on. Or some of you may be doing lying or standing meditation, so contact of your body with the earth. It will be in contact with something that's supporting you. That contact point may be obvious. Or the breath might be obvious. Or hearing. Hearing the sound of my voice might be obvious. Or perhaps it's more a sense of a mood that might be what's most obvious, or thoughts flitting through. Whatever happens in our experience, we can be aware of it. So this is like taking ourselves out of the driver's seat a little bit. Instead of controlling where we're going, what we're looking at, it's like we're allowing awareness to be the driver. We're just sitting and receiving what's happening, what's going by, what's arising and moving through us. Receiving experience. And some experience may come and go kind of quickly, and then something else comes. At other times, it may be that the attention lands on some particular area of experience for a little while and takes that in until something else kind of calls the attention. Allowing there to be relaxation and receiving whatever is most obvious. For some of you, if this is a new form of practice, you can start with whatever is and just with some obvious physical sensation. Just something that's clear and easy to connect with. Whatever contact point that may be, hands contacting, feet on the ground, body against the earth. Or a breath even. It could be the breath that's easy to connect with for a moment, for a few moments. Then instead of trying to hold to that, it's like you can start there. And then maybe something else will arise, the sound of my voice, and the attention shifts to that. You don't have to fight to stay with the breath or the body or whatever experience you chose. And so as you connect with experience, whatever wants to be received, seeing if that can be allowed, allowing experience. So that's a kind of an orientation to our mindfulness, that it's a very non-judgmental, relaxed, receptive, and allowing kind of awareness. Whatever arises in experience, whether it's a body sensation, an emotion, a thought, that can be allowed, it can be known, received in awareness. Mindfulness, I'm using awareness and mindfulness synonymously here. And this continuity of recognizing what's being received in awareness moment after moment begins to establish mindfulness, establish a continuity of awareness. This moment after moment, we're aware of body sensation, hearing, a breath, an emotion, hearing again, another breath, a body sensation, aware, aware, aware in each moment. And of course, the mind will wander. You will lose this recognition of what's being received. We'll get lost, hooked into thought. There's not much we can do while that's happening. But there will be a moment when awareness returns, when mindfulness returns, and you become aware first that you're here, wherever you are in this moment, and that the mind had been wandering. In that moment, knowing those two things, see if you can emphasize the being here part rather than the fact that the mind had been wandering. Aware again. Awareness has come back. Celebrate that. It's a great thing. It's an amazing thing. You didn't make that happen. It just happened. That moment when awareness returns spontaneously can be a wonderful place to connect with a very easeful awareness. Because again, we're not doing that moment. It's happening naturally. And so when awareness arises again, attuning to that, oh, aware again, and what is obvious in that moment? There's no need to jump to any particular experience in that moment. We're cultivating the awareness through receiving whatever is obvious. So what's obvious in that moment? It's possible that what's obvious in that moment will have a relationship, be connected to whatever the mind was doing as it was wandering. So there may be emotions or moods, feelings in the body that have arisen in dependence on that wandering. That's just what's here available to be known. You don't have to suppress that or pretend it's not here. It's just here. There may be some tension in the body. There may be some emotions that have arisen. Receive those. Receive what's here. If it feels like there's a draw or a pull back to the thinking, see if you can let that go in favor of just experiencing here and now. Perhaps this may not be relevant for some of you. Perhaps you may be experiencing the kind of the conditioned effect of having been thinking in this moment, just taking that in. Sometimes, and more often than you might think, when the mind wanders off into wherever it goes, it sometimes can wander into more calm. And sometimes when we return, there can be, if the mind had kind of been more spacing out instead of actively thinking about something, or just drifting, not really engaged with much attentionally, then sometimes the experience when we return, when mindfulness returns, it can be more easeful than it was before the mind wandered. And so if so, take that in, aware of perhaps a softening or an ease or a relaxing in the body that's available as the mindfulness returns. It's easy to miss this if we are orienting to the fact that the mind had been wandering and that we didn't like that that had happened. We notice that the mindfulness has returned, and often the first thing we do is judge ourselves for that. But sometimes the mind wanders into more ease, and if we're not judging in that moment, there's that possibility to actually connect with that. More ease after the mind wanders. More ability to easily receive experience. Allowing the unfolding to just naturally unfold. Relaxing. Recognizing that you're aware and receiving what's obvious. Allowing kind, allowing attention to whatever is arising, moment after moment. So we'll have a period for walking meditation now. And those of you who have been attending this in the past, this Wednesday morning, we're changing the schedule slightly this morning because I'm going to offer a slightly different form of walking practice than perhaps you've done in the past in this receptive style. So we'll have walking until 11 o'clock this morning, and I'll remind you about that before we head out to do the walking. So with this receptive form of practice, we, one of the things I really love about this form of practice is that it is so easy to go anywhere with us. It's very powerful in the sitting meditation to use this form of practice, because essentially what we're doing there is just witnessing our conditioning unfolding and learning about our conditioning, learning about the arising and passing of experience in moment after moment. But this form of mindfulness practice, while it can take us very deep, also can be very broad. It can be very accessible in whatever we're doing. Going to the grocery store, driving a car, talking to a friend, just being aware, knowing that you're aware, and receiving experience. And so in the walking, I would like to encourage you to explore it in this way. So the basic instructions are pretty much the same. We relax, and the way in for relaxing in walking practice is often a good way to relax is to just find a pace that feels really comfortable to walk in, and a kind of a more ordinary walking pace. But what feels comfortable? It may be slightly faster or slightly slower than you might think. So experiment with the pace a little bit and see what feels really comfortable in terms of being aware. There's kind of a pace of movement that mindfulness can kind of hook into or link into. So finding that pace, finding a relaxed and comfortable pace, and then again, we can just start receiving experience. What's obvious? This can be how we explore it in this very broad way. But there is a kind of a refinement, or a kind of a, what should I say, a simplification of receptive awareness in walking that may be useful for some of you, especially not if you've not used this kind of practice before. So I'm going to offer that today. So once you find a comfortable pace, then you're going to start by shifting the attention to seeing. And you're going to orient to seeing for a few paces, maybe 10 seconds, maybe 4 or 5 paces. Just know that seeing is happening in a very simple, broad way. You don't have to look at anything in particular. Just know that seeing is happening. Seeing, you could even name that or use a noting for that in your mind. Seeing is happening. And then after that 5 or so paces, you can shift to hearing, shift to the field of hearing and receive. Again, this is receiving each of these fields in turn. So for the first 5 or so paces, receiving that seeing is happening. Then shifting to hearing. Hearing is happening. Again, not listening or trying to find things to listen to, but just like letting the attention be at the ear and what is received. Receiving, hearing. And then after 5 or so paces of that, shifting to the physical movement of the body. Just in the broad sense, the body moving through space. Might be the movement of your arms and legs. And then the last one is the most specific, the one that can help to ground us again if we get a little bit spacey with this receptive awareness, which can happen at first. The last one is contact of the feet on the ground, touching the feet, touching each step, just knowing that contact for 4 or 5 paces. And then shift back to seeing. So you rotate between these 4 areas of experience: seeing, hearing, moving, touching. I remember the order because it's kind of top down, seeing at the eyes, hearing a little bit lower, body physically moving through space, and feet contacting the ground, and then shifting back. to seeing again. So you can explore that. And if you're familiar with this more receptive form of practice, you're welcome to just do that in the walking meditation. Just explore what's being received right now, moment after moment. So we will walk until 11 o'clock, and one of the resident volunteers will ring the bell 3 minutes before. I would like to encourage you to go ahead. We've got 25 minutes basically to do this. And so I would encourage you to go for a walk, go outside and do it as a kind of a more normal walk. We could call it stealth mindfulness practice. You may see people in the neighborhood. Don't let them know you're meditating. It's just a normal walk, but with this kind of orientation to being aware while you're walking. So taking a walk through the neighborhood. Now, so if you're doing that, you may want to keep an eye on the time a little more carefully so that you can be back, because we will start right at 11 o'clock again, but the RVs will ring a bell 3 minutes before 11 o'clock. So, you may need to keep a little bit more track of that. You can get a little further from your computer than 3 minutes away with this kind of walking. So, yeah, just keep track of the time. Okay, so enjoy your walking, and we'll be back at 11 o'clock. We'll have another sitting together for about half an hour. But I'll say a few words before we go into the sitting. With this form of practice in receiving experience, recognizing that you're aware and just receiving whatever is obvious. We cultivate a kind of attitude of allowing, which I mentioned earlier, not judging what's arising, but just like accepting what's offered, basically. Kind of that sense of just receiving what's given, accepting what is given, accepting what is offered. It's a way to think about this allowing attitude. It has arisen, it's already here, and so we might as well receive it and get to know it. With that more allowing attitude, then it doesn't mean that we just let things steamroll over us, but we can come to a place of choosing how to respond from a place of stability, of balance, rather than from reactivity. And so that's what we're cultivating with this allowing attitude, is the stability and non-reactivity to what's happening, so that wisdom can support our actions and our choices, rather than greed, aversion, confusion. And so we cultivate this allowing attitude, and yet it's not always easy to have that allowing attitude. The non-allowing attitudes will arise. And rather than trying to pretend they're not there or trying to convert them into an allowing attitude, actually the way to move in the direction of this allowing attitude, or what one of my teachers, Sayadaw U Tejaniya, calls wise attitude, right attitude, is to get to know what's in the way of it. So if you are noticing experience, and it doesn't feel like it's easy to allow it, if there's some resistance or some holding on or some confusion about the experience, then that can be what is received. Rather than it being kind of behind the scenes, in our mind, in the background, oh, I don't like this, and how can I fix this? We know, oh, this is happening, and not liking is happening. Resistance is happening. That is what is arising. That can be received also. And then we can perhaps explore allowing that is what is here. That is the conditions that have arisen. That can be received. And so it's useful from time to time, especially if it feels like there's a struggle happening in the meditation, to check in. Well, what's my relationship to what's happening? This might be a relationship to some experience that's happening. It might be a very direct experience of, we've stubbed our toe on the bed, and on the corner of the bed, and there's pain and we don't like it. That kind of response to the direct experience, kind of an attitude of wishing that hadn't happened. That's one way attitudes can manifest, is through that liking, not liking, confusion around the direct experience. But another thing that's going on here is that we are practicing being aware, we're practicing mindfulness, we're practicing meditation. And we can have relationships to what we're experiencing through that lens. This is what's arising, and it shouldn't be happening while I'm meditating. I'm not a good meditator. So we can have views or agendas or attitudes about the meditation and how it's going. Those can sometimes be a little bit further in the background. So if there's any sense of struggle in your practice, and this kind of practice might actually kind of create this in a way, in some ways, it's like the very unfamiliarity, perhaps for some of you, if you've not done this before, of the fact that you're not holding the attention on one experience, and the attention shifts from experience to experience, and there's not a lot of stability in the experiences that you're aware of. That we can have an attitude that that must not be right. I must not be set. The mind isn't settling down because it's knowing so many different things. Well, that's just a belief, because in fact, with this kind of practice, that kind of shifting of attention is what we are aware of. And so recognizing that as we practice, that we may have relationships to both the experience and something about how we're practicing with the experience. So it can be useful from time to time, especially if it feels like there's a struggle, to check in. What is my relationship to the experience? It might have a sense of resistance, of pushing away, of holding on, of wanting it to continue, a sense of confusion or disorientation. Those three flavors of attitude connected to greed, aversion, delusion. There might be an idea or view or belief about what should be happening or shouldn't be happening. That may happen in terms of the relationship to the agenda of meditation. That could fall into the delusion category, or it might fall into the aversion or the greed categories too. And so there can be these attitudes of resistance, holding on, confusion. But then there's also wise attitude, and this allowing, non-judgmental attitude that is also possible. And so sometimes we can check in. And so if it feels like, things are going kind of well, it can be useful to check in, well, what's happening now? What's my relationship to experience now? Sometimes when it feels like it's going well, there can be a little bit of leaning in of like, oh yeah, I'm doing it right. A little bit of greed in the mind there, a little bit of self-congratulations. That's extra. That's not necessary. So it's useful to know that. It's useful for that to be revealed. Then, oh, that's received. Oh, self-congratulations is happening. Thinking I'm doing it well is happening. That's what's arising in the moment. But sometimes when it feels like it's going well, what's happening is that the mind is not resisting or holding on or confused about things. It's just okay. It's experiencing that allowing, it's experiencing that equanimity, that balance of mind. And it can be useful to attune to that. What is that like when it feels like it's not a problem? So we'll begin the sitting in a similar way that we did before. We'll start with some relaxation. So letting yourself settle in to your body and being present. And allowing there to be a relaxation of the body. And maybe the mind can soften, release any tension that might be present. And from this place of whatever relaxation might be available in the moment, Are you aware? Is awareness present? And what does awareness know? Receiving. What is obvious in this moment? This receptive stance has a very light quality to it. It doesn't take a lot of work to receive what's already here. Are you aware? And what is obvious? How about now? Cultivating the stability of awareness by receiving the next obvious thing. What's arising each moment? It doesn't matter that the objects are shifting. If you are aware of the objects, and sometimes it can be useful to think about the objects coming to you, kind of settling back and letting experience come to you. That can support a sense of the stillness that's possible in the awareness itself. Even as experience might change pretty rapidly. Relaxing, receiving, allowing. Allowing what is here. It's already here. If there's any sense of struggle or it feels like it's hard to allow, maybe a sense of taking a step back and checking, well, what's the relationship? What's the relationship to the experience? How am I with what's happening? Another way to orient to the attitude. How am I with what's happening? And in the checking that, you might notice a resistance or holding on, wanting something to keep going, wanting something to stop happening, or some confusion. That is just simply the next thing. That's what's arising too. And it can be known. Can that be allowed? Resistance is happening. Or maybe you can at times step back and check that relationship. And it feels like it's okay. It's no problem. Take that in too. What does it feel like to be with experience without it being problematic? If there is a struggle in the practice, in the meditation, in any way, there is some kind of unseen view, perspective, attitude in the mind. And through revealing it, uncovering it, curiosity about, well, what is happening? What is the attitude? That moves us in the direction of being able to allow that. And so, as my teacher Sayadaw Tejaniya says, we move in the direction of wise attitude, of right attitude, by getting to know unwise attitude really well. Relax. Receive the experience. Cultivating this stability of mindfulness moment after moment, being aware of just what is obvious. We could say that mindfulness meditation, vipassana practice, is a wisdom practice. We are cultivating the conditions for mindfulness to stabilize, not just for that its own sake, but for the purpose of learning about our hearts and our minds, learning about how they get caught and struggle and experience stress, suffering, and happiness. And likewise, it's also possible for us to learn and understand something about what leads us in the direction of a different kind of happiness, a different kind of happiness than we're conditioned from our histories to orient towards. A subtler kind of happiness that's not about accumulating, getting, finding, having, but is about aligning with what is actually true, the nature of experience, aligning with the nature of experience. And as we deeply begin to recognize the nature of our experience as deeply impermanent, unreliable, because it's impermanent, unreliable as a place to any experience is in actuality so fleeting that there's no place really that we can land for very long at all. To have that sense of stability, of happiness with the having that we so crave. And so we begin to, with this practice, see how our minds get caught in those habits and patterns of wanting things to be a certain way, to landing on things. And we begin to find our way towards a different kind of happiness that's about not needing the conditions of the world to be a certain way, aligning with these truths of impermanent, unreliable, uncontrollable, not I, me, mine. In this kind of receptive practice that I'm exploring with you this morning, or this evening for some of you, whatever time of the day it is for you, we very quickly get to see the conditioned nature of our experience. We see the changing nature of our experience, the changing nature of our attention, how our attention shifts from thing to thing. And so with this, with this form of practice, we really are curious and get interested in watching our conditioning unfold. We sit, and rather than trying to control through orienting to a particular experience or construct an experience in meditation, we sit down and receive what is already unfolding. Watching, essentially, what we're doing there is watching the conditioning of our lives play out. And what happens when the conditioning of our lives play out, when we include mindfulness in it, the mindfulness with the curiosity about seeing these conditions playing out, not to play them out, but to witness them, leads to the understanding, begins to help the mind actually see and recognize what experiences tend to, what states of mind and what ways of engaging and relating to experience tend to create more stress in the mind, and what ways of relating and engaging with experience tend to create more ease in the mind. More ease in the mind doesn't necessarily mean that we don't do anything. I think I said that earlier, that the more that we can actually find a place or uh, a landing with the experience as it's unfolding, without reactivity to that experience, with it's okay, this is okay that this has already arisen, that from that place of non-reactivity, wisdom can support the choice of a skillful action, not an action out of greed, aversion, or delusion, but an action out of compassion or love, kindness, caring, intelligence, wisdom, rather than hatred, anger, frustration, confusion, pride, arrogance, desire, craving. And so wisdom, this cultivation of wisdom, is essentially, we're creating the conditions through relax, receive, allow, and from time to time checking the relationship to experience, to expose potentially attitudes that might be hidden behind the scenes. We're creating the conditions through that very simple practice to learn about what moves us in the direction of suffering and what moves us in the direction of release from suffering. And so we are cultivating wisdom. We're creating the conditions for wisdom to be cultivated. It's not so much that we're cultivating wisdom. The conditions allow for the arising of wisdom and understanding around what leads to suffering and what leads away from suffering. And so wisdom is really, we can say this is kind of the direction, and this is really the aim the Buddha pointed to. He, in the first noble truth, he said, understand suffering. This is kind of the base of our path. Understand suffering. That's wisdom. That's not an intellectual understanding, but an experiential understanding. Get to know what suffering is. With that understanding of suffering, we begin to see that the arising of craving is one of the key conditions for suffering to arise. And then the mind begins to orient towards the release from that craving and release from suffering. So that wisdom was big on, the Buddha was big on wisdom. And sometimes with that wisdom orientation, people, and maybe it's because of our habit, especially in the West, of orienting wisdom to somehow the mind and not the heart. That it can feel dry, or it can feel somehow not connected with the emotional terrain of our hearts. This is, I think, it's almost like a perspective of the way we hear the teachings around wisdom, when the word wisdom is used, when we hear teachings around non-reactivity, equanimity. We don't understand that as connected to the heart so much, somehow, just our perspective, our orientation. But the experience of what happens as we explore in this way, especially if we're open to it, or aware or curious about how does the heart respond when it's non-reactive. This allowing experience, the place where when we check in, yeah, this is okay, it can be allowed. Maybe it feels like no problem. Maybe it feels like equanimity, balance of mind. Those are almost more neutral kinds of qualities in a way. But it also can have the flavor of love, of compassion, or even joy. This heart that allows what's here, sometimes it's like a celebration. It's delightful to be with the experience. Other times it does have more of a sense of compassion because there's something that's a struggle or suffering that's being witnessed. That the okayness, the allowing of it, of suffering, of struggle, with that non-constrictedness, when greed, aversion, delusion, when the reactivity falls away and the heart experiences suffering, the response of the heart is compassion. And so the allowing there doesn't mean somehow we think it's okay, or that we, somehow say, yes, bless that thing. It's fine that that's happening. It's the allowing is that sense of this is what's here. It's an acknowledgement that what's here is here. And the heart, with the allowing rather than a restriction in the heart there, the heart responds with what feels like emotion. The Brahma Viharas are, we could call in a way, the emotional terrain of the heart that's not constricted. Love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. And so as wisdom grows in our practice, the more the wisdom grows and the more there is this capacity to have this place of non-reactivity, there is also the possibility for love and compassion and joy to grow. And they may be there when we check our relationship to experience, check the attitude. When every now and then, especially when we're struggling, we might check in. But at times when it feels like things are going well, again, checking in. Well, how is the mind? Well, it's okay. Things feel okay. In that place of the mind being okay with experience, it can be useful to hang there for a little while and say, what's the flavor for me of this okayness? This wise attitude. Wise attitude sounds kind of dry, perhaps. And again, it's oriented towards wisdom. The word, wise attitude. But the experience of wise attitude can have so many different flavors. It can have the flavor of equanimity or balance or ease or calm. And it can have the flavor of patience, love, kindness, compassion, joy, delight, interest, curiosity. These are wholesome qualities. And when they are experienced, when we recognize them, when we see, oh, wow, interest is here, or joy is here, patience is here, confidence, trust is what's happening. Becoming aware of those qualities in the mind, the way mindfulness works, it strengthens them. Mindfulness has this great property when we turn our wise mindfulness, turn this kind of curious attention to what's happening. If what's happening is reactivity, greed, aversion, confusion, it creates the conditions for that to get weaker. because we feel the suffering of it, we feel the pain of it. Our minds, fortunately, want to not experience, want to let go of pain. So the mindfulness of those states allows the mind to begin to want to release them. And on the other side, when we become mindful of wholesome qualities, these qualities that are infusing wise attitude, being aware of them, curious about them, curious about their nature, creates the conditions for them to get stronger. Because the mind understands this is the direction of well-being. Our system wants to move in the direction of well-being. It's just kind of confused about how to do that. We can look at being mindful in this way as allowing our system to get a different kind of education, an education about what actually suffering is and what happiness is. So we can have some time for questions. So you're welcome to type questions into the chat box, and I'll read the questions and then respond. I have one question. There's a little bit of a lag. And one thing that I wanted to speak to that I didn't quite get to so much in the guided, so I'll speak to this first, is often in this place of receiving experience, it feels like it's just sometimes feels kind of jumpy, like the attention is just jumping from here to here to here. And it's so different than what we're familiar with. It's so different than the kind of stability that we get with being with one object, that it feels wrong. It feels like this must not be right. So what I'd say is, to in this case, it's like the attention is shifting from experience to experience. We are cultivating the stability of mindfulness here. And so as long as there is awareness, as long as you're noticing, oh, this is what I'm aware of now. This is what I'm aware of now. This is what I'm aware of now. So as long as you know that you're aware, that's actually enough. It can just take a little time to get used to or adjust to the experience, the different kind of experience from being with changing experience versus stabilizing the attention on one experience. And so, as I said in the guided meditation, we can almost kind of like step back and into the knowing that we're aware, letting things come to us. That can help us to get a sense of stabilizing, what it's like to stabilize in the awareness. The awareness, the mindfulness is what we're trying to establish, not having an experience stay put. The power of mindfulness comes through the continuity of mindfulness moment to moment, whether on changing experience or on an experience that we can stabilize with. And in fact, the power of our mindfulness practice comes through noticing how experience changes, because that's where we see how the conditions unfold, how conditioning unfolds. So what I sometimes will say to people is, at first, if you're new with this, it may feel kind of disorienting to feel like the mind is just jumping. It's like we think the mind is all over the place. But So just give yourself a chance to kind of settle back and know, well, there is awareness here. It just feels different. It can take some time to adjust to that. And if it's too disorienting, then you could kind of alternate for a little while. Let yourself explore the receiving moment to moment and noticing how rapidly the attention shifts, or how rapidly you notice the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Sometimes it's rapid, sometimes it's less rapid. And then, after a minute or two, then shift back to something where you do have a little bit more stability on one object. But not to assume. It can take some time to adjust to that experience of the kind of quality of the mind shifting between experience to experience. So here's another, there's 3 questions here. Let's see. The first, suggestions when experience feels too challenging to be with, too hard, too much to allow. This is a really important question. When, as we check, the attitude, sometimes it feels like overwhelm, or it feels like I just can't be with this, or we just get lost. It's like being pulled into the quicksand of it, or we go down the rabbit hole of whatever it is. When experience is so strong that we can't be mindful of it, it's really useful to learn some skills to step aside from it. That's the first piece is, if we notice a particular sensation or mind state. For me, early on in my practice in particular, anger was like this. When anger would arise, I had such a habit of just reinforcing anger that I would just go down the rabbit hole of anger. It was very hard to be mindful of it. And so I learned a skill of saying, when I notice anger arising, I would say, I see you, but not now. And so there's a way in which we kind of ignore or put aside some difficult things and put our attention on something else. And that's what I did with this situation. It's like, I'd say, I see you, and my mindfulness isn't strong enough right now. So, and often I was walking while this would happen. And so I would say, well, yeah, you can take a walk with me, but I'm going to pay attention to my feet right now. So that it was not a repression or an aversive stepping aside from or ignoring, but a kind of kind way to say, yeah, I can't, that's not, and it's very kind actually. If the mind is going to get caught in that whirlpool of that emotion, it's not a kind thing to do to try to be mindful of it at that moment. And so letting your attention shift, it's not wise or kind, letting your attention shift to something where it's easier to be with. Very skillful to be able to do that. And there's a whole terrain in the middle where it can feel like it's hard to be with something, and that there is a reactivity to it. It's like focusing on the thing or the mind. It kind of feels like it's magnetized to the experience. Like it's hard to put the attention someplace else. Sometimes with that kind of situation, it can be useful to not like try to step aside from the experience, but rather to orient towards kind of a larger container. Like that thing that's happening that's so challenging and so sticky is one thing among thousands that are happening in the present moment. And so it can be useful to recognize that that's happening. And I would sometimes just do this very consciously, rotating through different experiences. It's like, yep, that's happening. I remember doing this once with depression. It's like, yep, there's that depression. And there's seeing happening. And there's hearing happening. And there's bodies open. There's the depression again. And there's seeing. So I would see that experience of that was so sticky, and then I would just remind myself, well, there's the other things happening, and just picking other experiences to just let the mind land with those for a moment. and then not trying to resist if that experience came up again. But as soon as I noticed that kind of, oh, there it is again, I would just let my attention take in something else. So kind of like making the container bigger. What happens when our mind orients to something like that is it tends to make it like it's like it becomes the whole world. It kind of deludes us into thinking it's the only thing that's happening. And so a conscious reminding that there's more happening, that can be useful. So another question here. Any suggestions for practicing receiving in the midst of daily activity? I would say the place to begin, and this is one of the great things about this form of practice, actually, I think I mentioned earlier, that the style of practice, and you're not trying to stabilize on any one experience or focus on anything in particular, just taking in what's happening, what's unfolding in our experience. And so it's ideally suited for daily life practice. Ideally suited for daily life practice. For me, the primary entryway for this has been kind of getting attuned to what it's like to be aware. Not so much focusing, so much I think when we're thinking about mindfulness, we're thinking about knowing like qualities or specific things about what's happening around us. So there's a little bit of aiming towards what's happening. And if instead we can kind of settle back and say, yeah, I know I'm aware, and there's things happening around me. I'm aware that things are happening around me. We don't have to try to focus on the details of that. Just keeping this thread of knowing that we're aware in this receptive way. That for me has been the biggest support, and a good way to begin to explore what it's like to know that you're aware is in your daily lives, wherever you are. You will notice mindfulness coming back at times. At first, it may be kind of a few times a day or something, that you remember, oh yeah, this is what it's like to be aware. That moment when mindfulness returns after we've been lost in thought, that's a great moment, because the moment before there was a little bit of, we were lost in thought, and mindfulness is back, and there's kind of like a lingering memory of what it was like a moment before to be lost. And so we get a sense of some clarity of, oh, this is what it's like to be aware. And again, in that moment, you're not doing the awareness. It's just happening. It's just arising. And so it's simple. It's not effortful. And that moment of mindfulness returning gives you a sense of, oh, this is what it's like to be aware and just know what's happening. So if you can notice that moment over and over again, whenever it happens, you'll actually start to discover it happens a lot more than you think it does. Because what often happens in that moment is we become aware, and our mind habitually orients to something that we've become aware of, and then we jump on that thing and we start thinking about it, and we lose the sense of being aware, and often lose awareness entirely. So if you can just begin to attune to that moment of mindfulness returning, what it'll start to do is help you to recognize that it's happening actually a lot more than you think it is. And so we begin to notice more of those moments. And that moment of noticing that gives you the sense of what it's like to be like walking across the street simply and just being aware, or picking up a glass and drinking and being aware, or having a conversation and being aware. So that moment of noticing when mindfulness returns in daily life, that's a prime moment for learning how to bring this practice into our daily activities. So it's time to stop. It is noon. There were many more questions that came in. Sorry, I didn't get to those. I want to just say one thing, one announcement, that I'll be offering a non-residential, it'll be an online retreat, kind of daily life practice form of this style of practice. I'll be offering it for a week from April 22nd through April 29th. If you're interested in this style, if it was interesting to you and you're interested in particular in understanding how to apply it to daily life, that's available. The commitment I ask from people is to attend all 7 days. It's a 2-hour session each day from 7:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. And I've set it up so that that'll work for a good half of the planet, hopefully. So, you know, you're welcome. It's a registration event. So you have to go to the IMC website, the Insight Meditation Center website, not the IRC website, but the IMC website. This is posted on the August 22nd date, and see the details of the schedule and the commitment that I ask from you and how to register. The Zoom link is not going to be publicly posted. You need to register to get the Zoom link for that. That'll be a Zoom event rather than a YouTube streaming event. So it was delightful to spend some time with you, even in this form. I've got a stuffed animal there to help me kind of remind me that beings are around, paying attention. And I hope that this was of service to you. And in the chat box, the resident volunteers have posted the link to the Zoom meeting for the community gathering just following. And I'll pass it now to Willow, who'd like to say his final words from the resident volunteers. So thank you.
Great. And thank you, Andrea, for your teaching today. And for everybody who's joined us, thank you for being here, and thank you for your practice. I just have a couple additional announcements. So next week we're going to take a break from this. So there'll be no mini retreat next week. Many of the RVs will be on retreat. And then we'll resume the following Wednesday, July 29th, with Diana Clark. And then also coming up on August 8th, there'll be a Saturday morning half day with Matthew Brensilver. And you can, I guess, keep a lookout for when we post more information about that. And so now we'll be going into the community time, and you can find the link to the Zoom here on YouTube. The password is community, and Lish will be facilitating that. Yeah, I believe that's all for me. Thank you again, Andrea, and thanks everyone for practicing today.